And in Primetime Adventures, one of the features is that um, the producer, as they're called, can is no different than anybody else in terms of scene framing. We go around the table, and the producer's turn just comes up like anyone else's, right? It's not a special position for framing scenes. You're just another scene framer. The only difference is that everybody else focuses on their character when they do so and says where their character is. When you're the producer, you basically pick one or more characters and
Mm.
say. So, but that's not really very different. The I mean, if I start a scene with my character and then I say, okay, I need you and you're going to be in this scene too, and point to another player, that's part of my job. So
Mhm.
it's not really different when it's the producer's point. The reason I bring this up is because the rules for what you can say as the scene framer are very, very clear. You say what your character is doing, where they are, and what they're doing in it at this moment. So you basically paint a picture of where they are and what they're doing at this moment. You aren't planning anything about the scene, and guess who has control over all NPCs, even for this purpose? The producer, not you. The producer is the one. You could say, "Oh, I'm chained up in the Witch of Awful's dungeon, or I'm in the Witch of Awful's bed,"
Mhm.
but it is the producer who says, "And the Witch of Awful is doing this or saying that." It's not up to you. You can't say, "Oh, I'm chained up in the Witch of Awful's dungeon, and she wants this and she wants that, and it's her birthday and all this kind of stuff." Right?
Yeah,
No,
yeah.
that's not your job. You get your hands off the Witch of Awful. That's the GMs. That's the producers. And if the producer wants the ninjas to come in through the ceiling anytime they want, they can during play. So, no, you didn't write the upcoming scene, but it was you who got to set up where we were and when. And that has some interesting implications because that does allow for certain events to have occurred. So the player has a little bit more, there is something going on there, but that's where they've got their wiggle room, is intervening events to some extent. And so as long as they're not messing with someone else's protagonist to do it, they can do that. That can
Mhm.
throw people curveballs because you're like, wait, what? It's 4 days later? Wasn't I in such and such a situation? It's like, yeah, when it's your turn to frame a scene, you're just going to have to account for that, or somebody's going to have to account for that along the way here. You
Mhm.
and so what I'm saying is that in Primetime Adventures, do you see how carefully separated the different topics or the different players or the different people, how many how separated the different elements in the fiction are in terms of the people talking? There's an
Right.
intersection. It's a very distinctive intersection that actually will be the dynamic content of the scene. Nobody wrote it ahead of time.
Mhm.
Whereas here, you're actually giving people more authority with those
Mhm.
points than they get in Primetime Adventures. So it might be worth thinking. Currently, you may be in kind of a euphoria of GM generosity, right? I don't want to, I don't want to be a dictator. Oh, here, you do it, right? All the
Mhm.
way. Is that really a good idea? I mean, it perhaps more, I mean, I bet there's more intersection of that kind when you frame scenes than you might realize, with intersection with what they get to say.
Mhm.
If there is, then you might want to preserve it when someone else actually names the location. Does that, in other words, they have a relationship to the other players the way you have a relationship to the other players when you were framing,
Right.
instead of them suddenly becoming Uber dude who has no obligations to anybody.
Right. I see that.
So that to me is kind of the most relevant part of what you're talking about. Um,
Mhm.
the precise details of what is proper for this person to simply say and the rest of us live with it, what is proper for them to say and do a quick double check on, and what's proper for them to keep their freaking paws off it. I don't think there's any ideal arrangement of what those things are that's good role playing and everything else isn't. I think that those can be arranged in a huge number of ways. What matters is, in terms of what falls into each of those categories, what matters is that the other people know it. The other people are safe in the way that this is done for this game. I
Yeah.
think that in a lot of games where nominally the game master sort of takes the lead on those transitions, I think that you play with that group for one session and you decide whether the way they do it is any good for you. And you're going to be judging that and you're going to walk if it's not there. I mean, along with a number of other things regarding authorities and stuff like that, you're going to walk if it's not proper for you. Um, and so, or if it seems dishonest in some way. So I guess that's part of it, is that, whatever way it is working when your group does it, it's good to think about what, yeah, those, I get, let's call it those three categories, right? What you can say and everybody has to take because they're looking forward to it. That's your job, to hand them
Mhm.
something that they have to live with. What do you say where you could put some creativity into it, or especially some spins, nuances, reversals, surprises? But it does step on what another character may have been doing or would do, or how they would act, or with their backstory. And that might be a good time. I mean, and that perhaps is where you check in. I don't know. But whatever it is that you say that is a good idea to get an okay on. And then finally, those things where you just don't go there. You don't go. And I'm not talking about like content that we find unacceptable. I'm talking about topics where this is just not what any of us wants to crisscross people when it comes to play. This is like, I don't know, the GM's job, or that's always that player's job regarding their character. We just don't. It's no fun for us. It's no fun in this game to mess with that. Anyway, does that help at all? I mean,
Yeah, yeah, it does. It definitely gives me a lot to
mm-hmm.
think about. I think that's when I set out to make this game, that was one of the things. This right here is one of the things that I thought about, is this ownership authority kind of thing. It's like, I wanted to be more mixed
Mm-hmm.
together,
Mm-hmm.
but now that it is about establishing some guideline, because it doesn't need to feel like there are five GMs all battling over things.
Right, and that is actually one
Yeah.
of the problems that we see in a number of current games, is that, as I like to say, if you have people whose idea of the game master is somebody who overrides things as we thought they were, right? Who gets to override dice rolls, perhaps, gets to override concepts, gets to reinterpret, a recent experience of mine concerned physical confrontation during play, among characters, and the game master wasn't really comfortable with that being a physical confrontation. He wanted to kind of get over this scene and play something else. Didn't want the character hitting this other NPC. It was uncomfortable for them in terms of where play might go. So they just ignored the possibility of a dice roll, even when the player was like, "I'm ready to roll," holding up their dice. They just ignored it and kind of talked their way through the outcome and brushed it off and moved into, shifting out of that scene. And it was kind of puzzling. It was kind of like usually when player X says, I hit the guy, pull out the dice, right? He's hitting
Mm-hmm.
the guy. But this is where the GM was iffy and didn't like it and didn't want to play that and just kind of smoothly talked their way around it and went on and played something else.
Mm.
And so if you're used to the game master having that kind of utter, I like to call it kind of the scoutmaster, den daddy, right? The Boy Scouts den daddy thing where they basically, you can all chit chat and roll your dice all you want, but I will indeed tell you how it all goes. If that's the case, then people are used to that. Then when you start sharing out what you call game mastering, or you use the euphemism, which is no GM, which of course is the opposite of what you're really saying, but
Right. Yeah.
you use that euphemism, and then everybody goes, ah, and then all of a sudden, instead of one person railroading everybody, you have everybody railroading everybody. And from my perspective, I mean, that's just, five times nothing is still nothing,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
So that's, I think, what we're trying to avoid here. We're trying to say that when you have a single GM decision made about framing a scene, there are standards that you are using, and they're good, and people like them. So if you want to share that around, everybody's still got to have standards. And
See.
I don't think that's very difficult. I actually have seen applications of it that are very functional, many of them informal. And unfortunately, I will point out one of the worst things about primetime adventures is how badly people misplay it, because they say, "Oh, I get to frame my scene," and then they go crazy and start explaining everything that's about to happen in it,
Yeah.
right? And then
Yeah.
everybody
That
goes into
that
story workshopping about what's going to happen in it, and then I leave the table because that's not how those
that's
rules work.
something that I see players trying to do in my game too. Sometimes they'll get excited, and when they want to frame a scene, they're not only thinking about framing the scene, they're thinking about the outcome, and they're
That's the
trying
thing,
to,
right? That's
you
the
know, and I always
railroady
had to
thing.
stop.
Yeah,
Like, no, no,
yep,
no. You don't get to
exactly.
say what their motivations are. You don't get
Right,
to say what method they're using.
right.
You start it, and then we play.
Right. Now, I think that's exactly the right idea, because again, what most people call railroading, although that term is used for many, many different things, is to override the way we thought we got outcomes and just tell us what the outcomes are,
Hmm.
or to do it subtly and we go through all the motions, but you just say it the way you want anyway. Um, those are when one person who's supposed to have outcome authority that's constrained by instruments says, "Oh, I guess I'm not constrained. Those instruments are just for show, right? I really drive
Mhm.
the car with my mind, all the pedals and wheels and stuff like that. That's just, that's just for show." And so the the discussion of of the upcoming scene and its outcome is exactly that. They've forgot they were in the car, right? And say, "Oh, I'm not really in a car. I'm just going to go and like drive this with my mind because it's exciting." Um, that is, again, as you say, it has to be sort of a trained behavior. That's not the way the rules work. The way the rules work is like this, and you know, you wouldn't put up with that shit from me, now would you? I'm not saying you should say that, but that's the logic, right? I mean, you wouldn't put up with
Right.
that shit from me. I start
Mhm.
telling you, I put you in a scene, I start telling you, all these things about like how it's going to go and all the rest of it. All the rest of you are like, fuck you. We have dice for that. I
Mhm.
do this first. you know, and if you don't want me to do that first, you roll your dice. We'll find out. And
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's kind of the same thing. I mean, it's sort of like saying, you wouldn't put up, in mentally speaking, You wouldn't put up with that from me. Please don't do that to us.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's sort of the, I mean, the teaching of that is tricky. The belief that the game master does have all that overriding power and that it's their benevolence that keeps them from exercising it. That's a very toxic framing. That's a very toxic concept, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, it
it's
is.
as opposed to saying the GM is a player with specific authorities, responsibilities, and constraints that are just, I mean, basically it's just having a different instrument in the band. I mean, there's
Mhm.
always one instrument in any, well, I won't say always. I mean, you can have like people all playing guitars, but in a lot of cases, one of the instruments in a band is super different from all the others. And
Right.
that's what I think most GMing constructions are. They are a different instrument and they happen to be a weird one. You know, the others are all, you blow through all the others and this one you bang on. It's got a
Yeah, yeah.
different relationship to the others, right? And so that's fine. I mean, it seems to me like that's a good thing. But to say that, you know, actually the GM doesn't have an instrument, the GM is at the mixing board and they can make whatever sound they want come out of it. In fact, they can even synthesize it all themselves at that board while we all bang and toot away. Right, we're all
Mm-hmm.
playing, but you know, it all goes into the mixing board, and the GM's like, no, I think the song's going to go like this. Here, I'll just play this recorded bit that I like better.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And that is, and I'll let it be what you guys do when I feel like it, or if it sounds good enough, or you know, if I feel like letting your little noises be heard. And I think that it is that people fear when they see these story points go to somebody like, oh no, that person's going to, you know, that person's going to do all sorts of weird shit, don't I?
Mm-hmm.
So who knows? Maybe there are easy phrases to work your way through this, but you're never going to find phrases that are going to please a person who genuinely just hates it.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not even
Right.
for good reasons. Maybe they hate it because of their past history. Well, good reasons for now. I mean, maybe they have
Right.
no
Right.
reason to fear this in reality, but they have plenty of reason to fear it given their past history. So, there's not much to be done when that's the case. Um, so, anyway, that's sort of my thinking at the moment.
Yeah. You've given me a lot to think about. So that's what I will be doing this next week.
Excellent.
Just mulling
Next
it over.
time, is it possible for you to send me any materials I may need to know how to chop through that abominable half human thing's neck before it tears me limb from limb?
Okay.
If you send me the any brief rules that I can have to sort of familiarize myself enough to simply be prepared to run some numbers and dice and stuff, then
Mm-hmm.
that would make next session really, really worth. I mean, it would suit, I think, the right needs for the next session, which is to kind of get out of the scenes, big
Mm-hmm.
scenes. And no, I want to know how to fight a werewolf. Let's do that.
Okay. Sounds good.